Hey guys, welcome back to World of Warships. It is a big day today. We get to talk about the proposed carrier rework here. This is early days. This is the very first time I've been able to look at these mechanics and actually play with them. You've seen the timeline for this video. It's long. I apologize, but there's a lot to talk about, and I've got several experiences to show for you. Several surface ship perspectives here, as well as playing carrier myself. I'm not very good at it, but I do think there are some mechanics there that I can discuss. Before we get into this further, though, I'm very biased, and you need to know that up front. Personally, I very much dislike carriers in this game. If it were up to me, they would be gone. They just would not be in the game in their current state. I don't have anything against carriers in the way they look or airplanes in general, but the game mechanics do not fit World of Warships in my opinion. I've long held this opinion, and the more I've thought about it, the more I really think these carriers fundamentally do not fit World of Warships. World of Warships is a PvP experience. And in a PvP experience, you have plenty of options available to you to engage with other players. You can play defensively, and what does that look like? That looks like maneuvering, that looks like positioning, that looks like just dodging. You can also play offensively. You can go on the attack and deal damage to that enemy ship and maybe take them out of the game. And that is the fundamentals here to a PvP game. I probably don't need to explain that to you. But how do you play offensively against a carrier? I don't believe you can, and that is the problem. I think the problem with carriers is that you're forced into playing only defense in a PvP experience where theoretically a good PvP experience allows both players to be on relatively even footing and have options to play defensively and offensively against one another. Some people have said that you can play offensively against carriers by removing their planes, by shooting planes down. That impacts their ability to play the match. And equated that to a similar amount of damage to a surface ship prevents them from playing the match, and in fact maybe takes them out of the match. I don't like this line of thinking, as you still have a carrier in the match once you're deplaned, and you even can regenerate your planes. You're not taken out of the match. You're impacted in your battle impact. It's reduced, of course. But to me, taking out aircraft is similar to taking out modules on a ship. Say you take out my main gun temporarily. That to me is similar to taking out enough planes that the carrier has to wait for them to regenerate. And they do regenerate. What happens when my main gun is taken out permanently? What happens when my torp tubes are taken out permanently? You see where it's a little bit different for carriers, guys? For me, that is the big difference there. You're forced to play defense, you cannot play offense, and the tools you do have to sort of play offense, when you look at it closely, don't really allow you to play offense against the carrier. They're still defensive measures. It's called defensive AA. So for me, I don't like carriers, and I don't think any of these proposed changes are going to fix things in that respect. However, there are some good changes here that we need to point out. My goal with this video is to approach this as charitably as I can. This is not going to be a video of me blindly raging about carriers and ignoring any of the positives here with these proposed changes. I would like to act in good faith and assume Wargaming is taking a look at some of this feedback and going back to the drawing board in an effort to improve this game that, I'll be honest, I still very much enjoy. I really like this game. I don't like the carriers and their mechanics, subs as well, but I really enjoy this game. The surface ship combat is amazing, and there really is no substitute for a game like this that requires such careful thought in positioning minutes before any of the action actually happens. You set yourself up to win or lose based on tactics more than fast twitch reaction time, and there's very few games like that. And that's one of the things I love so much about this game. So you're definitely getting a surface ship player's perspective here. And that's important because there are main issues to tackle when it comes to CV rework here that involves surface ships specifically. I think that's where I'm going to offer the best perspective I can give on this is for the surface ship changes. I will discuss the changes when it comes to aircraft carriers as well, but just know I don't really play these at all, and you really should go look for some opinions of aircraft carrier players. That's really important here. Look for other different perspectives on this, and that'll give you a nice holistic look at different members of the community on what these changes look like. And for our sakes, I hope Wargaming looks at that as well and really takes a close look at some of the opinions in this community. Now, before we get into any of the gameplay video, we need to discuss what does Wargaming want to change, the issues they're trying to tackle, and then look at and frame our criticisms around these issues here that they have stated. Spotting. Aircraft carriers provide constant yet intermittent spotting that can greatly influence the flow of the battle for surface ships. Indeed, they do. AA defenses don't feel sufficiently powerful for surface ships, they do not, but feels relatively strong for carriers. Focus. Being targeted by an aircraft carrier can be extremely frustrating, especially if your AA doesn't feel impactful. Oh yeah. Our goal is to reduce spotting overall and make it a conscious choice that comes at a cost, even if the cost is simply time and risking planes, while removing unintentional spotting. Another goal is to make AA more impactful while ensuring aircraft carriers remain viable in battles. We believe the changes outlined below will make the game more satisfying for both sides. Well, let's see what they've done. And to be honest, this looks relatively complex, but as I've played with it, it's fairly simple. It's much more complicated, though, than just remove carriers' planes from being able to spot, though. A very nice, simple solution that Wargaming themselves has tested and apparently did not work. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to see any of the testing in that, but as we're going to see soon, I think that's a very nice solution to some of the issues with aircraft carriers. They've said there's other issues like focus and that sort of thing, AA not feeling impactful, but spotting's a big issue, and removing that would be a big help to many ships in this game to feel much better against aircraft carriers. It wouldn't fix everything, but in my opinion, it would be a nice solution. I like that they're going in trying to fix other issues, though, and not just going for remove spotting and that fixes everything about carriers, because it wouldn't. I will admit, though, it is a pretty crucial aspect that could be changed rather easily, and I'm not sure why it didn't have good results in their closed testing. So what have they changed about aircraft carriers? You have two modes, high altitude and low altitude. At the basics, high altitude is where you fly at maximum speed, you can't spot enemies, you can see enemies that are spotted by your allies, though, and you can't be targeted by AA. You can take damage from fighters, though, so you have to be a little worried about that. And you can swap over to low altitude from this high altitude mode. In low altitude, you have two modes, attack mode and recon mode. In this mode, either one, you can be targeted by AA. Your planes will travel a little bit slower, and in recon mode, you will be able to spot enemies. In attack mode, you will also be able to spot enemies. So this in practice is a great way to make spotting an intentional act by the carrier. And in practice, I do think that works out. However, we're going to see some massive problems with this swapping from low altitude to high altitude and back for attacking, where your AA is really only able to target the 2 or 3 aircraft that go into attack mode or recon mode. So you're not able to deal damage to the full squad anymore. And you're going to realize that you don't shoot down many planes at all. Carriers will have very little losses with these proposed changes, and I hope you'll notice that in the gameplay section a little bit later. Something else to mention here is once the planes descend, the attack starts automatically. This is very awkward with rocket planes and dive bombers. There's not a lot of room for error when aiming, and the transitionary time between high altitude getting into this descent before the attack starts, it all happens automatically. So there's a very large lead time now when dealing with attack rocket planes as well as dive bomber planes. So I found them to be very hard to aim. To be fair, that could just be skill issue because again, I do not play carriers that much. But with torp bombers, I didn't have that issue as there's less of a small drop circle. The torps will go through the water a little ways, and it made it a lot easier. Carriers will also get manual control over their secondary guns, so they function just like main guns. You aim like main guns, you click the 1 key, you have HE, and you get 15 kilometers of range, at least for now, with these tier 10s. I will look at that towards the end. There's some pretty high DPM there, but I found the shells to be a little bit floaty as well. And now for surface ship changes. A lot of things to check out here, but what it comes down to is manual AA is now the new name for sectoring your AA. So when you click the button to sector your AA to one side and do that % burst damage to the squad, that still functions the same, except it covers the whole area. So think of this as burst damage specifically. And that's all it is. It's just the burst damage to the carrier planes. Unfortunately, it only targets the planes that are attacking or the planes that are spotting. So that's that small group of 2 or 3 planes. So percentage-wise, you're not dealing very much damage at all because you aren't able to interact with the full squad anymore. Defensive fire now only affects planes at low altitude. It was a proposed thing that AA would affect at higher altitude, but it no longer does. So you cannot shoot your AA at any planes at high altitude. Defensive fire is going to increase your AA on your ship to 7 kilometers. Pretty good. It increases AA damage a bit, just like before. And here's the key. This is worded so poorly here. I think this might be a translation thing, but there's a blinded effect. You can blind the enemy carrier's planes if you use your defensive fire before they start their attack. So when the carrier is in their high altitude travel mode, and if you've activated your defensive fire, before they switch over to attack mode, you will blind the carrier planes. So they will no longer be able to spot. And that's pretty good. You're no longer able to spot for yourself as a carrier if you run into a already up defensive AA fire. The problem is it's not very clear when that's active, especially as the surface ship. When have you blinded the planes? When have you not? But UI can be worked on. That can definitely be cleared up, if not by wargaming, by some modders. But the mechanic there is interesting. You also get a boost to automatic AA progress to 50%. What is automatic AA? This is your anti-focus tool. So this progressively increases, similar to a combat instructions, while your AA is active. And once it's fully charged up, it activates automatically, works for an extended period, and what it does is increase your AA damage, increases damage caused by manual AA, that's your burst percentage damage, as well as reduces the cooldown on that burst percentage damage. It's kind of pitiful, but I'm getting ahead of myself. And lastly, we have fighters, can attack planes at both high and low altitudes. This is basically the only thing as a CV I had to worry about as far as losing planes. So that was a lot of information, very dense, I apologize. When you go over it on the web's page, it does take a while to go through. As you play with it though, it starts to make a lot more sense. So let's get into our first game, as I want to be positive about the things that are good in this proposed change. Destroyers are going to love this change. I played Shimakaze on accident with F3s. And we're going to do pretty well. And that's in a double carrier game, 6v6, okay? That is not great matchmaker for a Shimakaze with F3s. And real quick to talk about the matchmaker, I don't know what Wargaming is really going to get from this. Everyone's going to be focused way harder than they would be in a regular game. There's half the number of ships and double the number of carriers you'd see at high tier. You're also seeing everyone running full AA builds. So a little later, when I play a carrier, you're going to see me run into double full AA Worcester. What that shows about carriers, I don't know. So I'm not terribly confident in Wargaming's testing practices. I don't know. Again, I'm not going to be too critical of that. I just hope Wargaming's factoring that in, and I really question how valuable some of this data really is, unless it's just to get feedback from players on what they think about these changes. Hakuryu going in for a strike, or perhaps just a spotting run. Notice how he only has a couple planes drop down, and they do spot us, but it's intentional. They have 100% succeeded on the spotting being intentional outside of the fighter planes. I have no idea why fighter planes still operate the same way that they do in the current game. So as a carrier, you can drop fighter planes and it still just spots everything like normal with plane spotting. I don't know why. It's been nearly a year since they announced they were gonna test this stuff. Why weren't fighter planes looked at in that way? I don't know. I'm gonna gloss over that because Shimakaze here is going to feel very nice into these carrier changes. When carriers are traveling around the map, and they do so rather quickly, you really don't have to worry that much about being accidentally spotted. Carrier coming over us here, and I'm not worried. Also, Rip Zhao, I'm sorry, my man. Barely in range for those torpedoes. Do a lot of damage. But notice how I'm not really that worried about repositioning. As a stealth-focused ship, I'm loving this change. I can maneuver around the map and play my stealth role without accidentally being spotted. The carrier has to have good game sense to know about where I am, and very specifically know where I am actually, considering the 2.7 kilometer AA detect for a Shimakaze. So this is a really, really good change for torp boat DDs. For gunboat DDs, it's a little bit worse, I think, just because you're going to be spotted a little bit further out while you're firing your guns. Typically, that's what you're doing as a gunboat DD. But notice I repositioned from the 10 line here over to the GK and Worcester. They have no idea that I'm here. This is very, very powerful and a very, very good change. It makes me consider, though, how poorly the spotting testing went in the closed testing that they talked about doing and that it didn't work. I don't know how it could not have worked based on how this feels as a destroyer player. It's just good. It's just better. It is just better. So I'd love some clarification on that, as the spotting changes are a great thing. It feels way less oppressive to play a destroyer. Playing cruiser as well feels a lot better in this regard to spotting, especially if you have a defensive fire. If you don't have a defensive fire and you're a bigger cruiser, like a battle cruiser, for example, you're going to be struggling a bit. Battleships as well certainly will be struggling. It is not hard to spot battleships. It's not hard to know where battleships are or where they're going. Spotted from the moon. So, in my opinion, when it comes to spotting here, it's neutral to a positive change. It's neutral for battleships and large cruisers. It's a small benefit for cruisers with defensive fire, stealthier cruisers, and it's a big improvement for DDs. Look at this carrier flying right over top of me. Right over top of me. I am not spotted at all. He has to go in for a strike or for a spotting run for this to actually impact me here. And he doesn't, because he doesn't know where I am. He doesn't know that I'm right underneath him. It's not as easy. And this is good. This is a very good change, guys. The spotting is massively improved for destroyers particularly. Notice we're also not going to get spotted by these planes going in for an attack run. How does that work? Well, they must be blinded. That's where our Worcester must have popped his defensive fire for us. And that's going to prevent us from being spotted at all either. A very good change. Think about some destroyers that can slot defensive fire now. They suddenly cannot be spotted by an aircraft carrier. That's pretty cool. That's some pretty cool counterplay for spotting, right? I think that's a good change. Like I said earlier, and I think a lot of others have pointed out already, the lack of a UI to know when the carrier's planes have been blinded or not is very difficult. Maybe they could put a little eye with like the crossed out eye icon we're going to see a little later when I play carriers. Maybe they could put that icon above the planes so that you know that they're blinded. Here, for example, carrier planes coming in, both carriers trying to strike this friendly Worcester. I'm not getting spotted. Our Worcester has his defensive fire up. I don't get spotted. That is a very good thing. That's a very, very good thing. It allows you to play this stealthy role. So good job, Wargaming, on the spotting. I think that's a massive improvement. I think most people are really going to enjoy that. Destroyer players are going to love this, and I think that's a big, big improvement to the quality of life of destroyer players playing against carriers. The other thing to consider that I didn't really run into while playing the Shima here is when the carrier comes to strike you, there's so much lead time, there's so much prep time for the carrier planes, they're really not going to get very good strikes off on you anyway. So as a destroyer player, I think you're going to be spotted far less than before, never accidentally, and you're really not going to take much damage from carriers at all, just because of the way the drops are, they're pretty awkward. Let's move on to Battleship though, as that's what I play. Now, this time we are playing a tank build Montana. This is another reason why I question the validity of the data in this test, as, let's be honest, everybody in this test is probably running a full AA build. Are you going to run a full AA build in random battles on the normal server? Probably not, unless you see carriers literally every game, and I don't think this change is going to result in that. So, as far as testing goes and how powerful AA is, if they balance it around everybody running a full AA build, that's not really valid data when it comes to dealing with the live server. So that's a problem. If they're balancing it to be an okay experience for both both surface ships and carriers, if it's balanced around a full AA build, well, you're just going to suffer if you don't take that full AA build. Notice how many planes are just around us, and our AA is not up very often. This is a big problem here, where you're only able to shoot at a few of the planes at a time, only the ones going in for an attack. So our percent damage, our burst percent damage that I'm using here, does not deal very much damage at all. And you're not going to see much progress on your anti-focus measures, that automatic AA progress. You'll see that when the planes get into our range again, between where my rudder is and then the reloading times of my guns and my dive bombers. There it is. We're still not even at half progress in this game. And we're not doing that much damage? Like, we're not shooting down that many planes? It feels bad from Battleships, guys. I'll be honest. This feels worse as a Battleship player. Because you're not able to interact with the squad, it now means carriers operate a lot like an FDR. And an FDR where they don't take AA damage after their strike, and their massive squad does not take AA damage at all. So the carrier can just hover around you and come drop you over and over and over again, and there's not a whole lot you can do unless you have a defensive fire to do that blinding effect, which battleships and large cruisers won't benefit from as much. Notice here we go in for our burst, and we do 197 damage with our burst. And don't even shoot a plane down yet. Still haven't farmed up our automatic AA, guys. So the other problem here, I already mentioned this for destroyers, carriers have a bit of an awkward pattern. It takes a much longer prep time to actually go in for a strike. It results in them just wanting to farm battleships, because battleships move so slowly that it's very easy to line up those drops on battleships, where it's much more difficult on cruisers, light cruisers, and especially destroyers. So as a battleship player, you're even more the priority target of the carrier to get damage in on you.
Problem solved, sir.
Automatic AA, still not here. Done a total of 17,000 damage to carrier planes so far, and we've finally shot down 5. And here's the other problem. I already mentioned this earlier, kind of teased it, but you almost have no buffs from this automatic AA. Nowhere near enough for it to matter for a carrier coming to focus you. It's a problem. The other thing you have to be very conscious of is when are you using your manual AA. This is this burst fire, this sectoring AA burst fire to burst damage thing. You cannot use it the instant your AA mounts start firing visually. You have to wait for the damage numbers to start ticking on the enemy aircraft planes. That's the only time that burst fire, that burst damage is going to actually impact the planes. It sounds obvious, but when you're in the thick of it fighting, you hear your AA go off and you just click the button. You can't quite do that. I found there to be a bit of a delay sometimes, not all the time. It was very weird. So you really do need to just be looking at it and waiting for that plane damage to start, and then you can burst it. So finally, I think here I'm going to activate it. Let's see. I think this is when we get our automatic AA proc. And it doesn't... There we go. I think that's it. So it lasts a while, but it doesn't actually buff your damage really that much. 10% damage frequency, 2.5% to that burst damage, and I guess a 50% cooldown to that burst damage. So maybe you can activate it a few more times. But the thing is, the planes are immune the instant the drop happens, right? The only time I can deal damage to them is when they're in this attack pattern. And I don't think I can slap them twice with the manual defense reinforcement, which is your burst damage. The planes are also faster, okay? So there's no boost on planes anymore. There's no speed anymore at all. It's just they run at maximum speed when they're in their travel mode. This results in the carrier being able to get around you rather quickly. Bigger ships can be cross-dropped. Again, I don't think that's going to happen to DDs. They're just quick enough, probably. But anytime I'm playing a battleship, man, it is very, very hard to maneuver to dodge the torpedoes now, as they can just run around you rather quickly and immune to your AA. So they don't even have to go outside of your AA range to turn around. They can just do it inside your AA range and start an attack right away. And I did that a little bit with Hakuryu a little later, as we're going to see. It's a little bit silly. I'm not very good in carriers, so I'm not actually going to show them off as being that overpowered. But mechanically, if you're good at aiming carrier drops, it's kind of crazy. We also still lose AA mounts, so we permanently have damage modules, which is going to hurt. That does not help us against these planes here at all. Trying to deal with this midway, though. Still the same armor scheme. He does have manually controllable main guns, I guess, secondary guns that are now main guns. So he could be shooting at us here, which I think is interesting. That further reinforces my disagreement with you remove a carrier's planes, they can't impact the battle. I just don't believe that. It still has the secondary guns. It still will regenerate planes slowly. If my guns get taken out perma, my torps get taken out perma, I can't do anything. But I'm still in the game. I'm still able to spot. I'm still able to cap. I'm still able to impact the battle in other ways. And it's not like you lose that many planes. We've now shot down 9 planes. Keep an eye on that number, guys. I won't remember to call it out the whole time, but yeah. How are you ever going to deplane a carrier? How are you ever going to deplane a carrier now, man? I don't know. They would have to run at a full AA Worcester over and over and over and over again, and then maybe you will deplane it. But as we're going to see, carriers don't get punished as hard for running into full AA clumps of ships, because you only have your 3 or 2 planes that can take AA damage. I can go in for a drop on like 4 AA Worcesters. I will lose at most my 1 squad of planes, my 1 attack pattern of planes. That's it. The rest of the squad is totally fine. So, not a great time in Monty. Let's try full AA Worcester. To be fair, I was not running a full AA build there with Montana. I ran a more standard build, I would say. Midway comes in to our AA range. I use the burst damage there. We're getting more damage. We get 1 plane shot down. And I launched my fighter. I'm running full AA Worcester. I ran fighter instead of radar. We got 1 shot down by the fighter. And here's the other thing. Fighters take a while to engage. These planes run rather quickly. The enemy carrier planes run very quickly. So if they notice a fighter tailing them actually latch onto them, which they don't always latch on, even though it says fighters, they can just recall to their carrier and not lose any planes. You have to sit there, watch the fighter catch up to your squad for a few seconds, and then they'll start to mow down your squad. Because I suck at carriers, you'll see that happen later on. But there are times where I did catch it in time and actually just not lose planes, or lose like 1 or 2 planes to fighters, and that was it. It's very, very forgiving to carriers. Far more forgiving than it ever has been in the past. To be fair though, full AA Worcester here, they did not want to mess with me. Again, we're only seeing a 6v6. I play on North America. I have North America time slots, okay? So maybe everyone in EU had stopped or gone to bed, or I don't know. and we only had like 200 people on the test server. So it's possible that that's the reason, but if Wargaming are just having these 6v6 games as their test platform for this, I don't understand how that gives good data. I really don't. Midway does leave our AA range though, which is nice to see. The other thing I wanted to point out here that I forgot to actually while it was happening, when you use your defensive fire, it automatically gives you 50% up to your automatic AA proc. That's your anti-focus device, that anti-focus measure. So that's pretty cool. You saw how long it took me to farm that up as a Montana, so cut that in half on any ship that has defensive fire. If these changes were to go through, which I know they won't, and I don't want to just act like these changes are coming to live, but if these changes came to live tomorrow, I would never play any ship without a defensive fire ever again. Even though the defensive fire isn't that amazing at shooting down planes, the blinding effect combined with giving you that extra little bit of progress towards your automatic AA defenses, the anti-focus measures, it's just required, basically. It's just required. I don't know what you're going to do as a Yamato. I don't know what to do as a GK. Even Montana was pretty rough. This Yamato pushing in. We're still a Worcester. We're still a light cruiser, so we should die here, right? Well, we're a light cruiser, so we're actually not going to take that much damage. Full AA build also means I'm not running reload mod. I ran the AA upgrade in the 6th slot. I really went for it here. And he did not come after me. So, to be fair, if you run a full AA Worcester, which I don't think really that many people do in random battles, but you could run it and have carriers not come after you. So there are options there, I suppose, but it feels like an all or nothing kind of deal where some ships are the carrier never goes after them and other ships are, oh, it's just free. I don't like that very much. And like I've already mentioned at the beginning of this video, my real problem when it comes to carriers and their planes and surface ships is the lack of offensive counterplay. That you cannot aggressively deal damage to the carrier, and that prevents them from coming closer to you or playing as aggressively to kill you. You can't do it. There's just nothing you can do about it, which is quite disappointing. And that's a big issue where surface ship combat has that, even with the ability of destroyers to generally be better at killing battleships than battleships are at killing DDs. If they make a mistake and get spotted close to you, I mean, battleship guns with the overpens hurt, man. You can do a ton of damage to DDs. So there's still offensive measures you can take. Against carriers, the only thing you can do is hope that they run at the A cap and just turn broadside and sit there. Not foreshadowing anything here, by the way. Hakuryu Torps, though, hurt. Also, full secondary GK getting double sit there into Monty? Crazy. RNG looking spicy on the test server for me, apparently. Oh, man. So Hakuryu has 12 Torp planes in a full squad, and they go 2 at a time. You need to be able to shoot down at least one, otherwise you're getting smacked for 14k over and over and over again. Unless they drop your bow like this, I suppose. But they move around very, very quickly. It's rough, man. And I had some people in chat talking about how Hakuryu sucked to play because you felt like you were only dropping one Torp at a time. So to me that sounds like it sucks for the carrier player to only drop one Torp. It's annoying. You have that option now where your whole squad can be damaged, but it also means that the first planes to die are not the planes dropping Torps. So you're oftentimes always going to get 2 Torps off as a Hakuryu. You're fully going to get your full drop off on people. Now that doesn't happen, and I can see where that can be frustrating as a carrier player. Like I said, I'm really trying to not just like bias my way into carriers suck and they need to, this is all bad, right? I'm trying to understand the other perspective as well. So that means that it sucks for surface ships and it's annoying for carriers too. Like both sides are annoyed by this change in some ways, where you can never deal with the carrier squads and the carrier feels like his strikes are just all super nerfed. I don't know. Oh yeah, there's the Midway, by the way. Overled this one, unfortunately. Good thing we have a Yamato on our flank who does not miss. Very nice to see. Or at least next salvo, I think he wins. But this time, you do have to clump up with your AA. That's something else that you have to do, basically. You have to play in a clump, and that is not really changing. Maybe for destroyers, you can play more on flanks, but battleships need to have an AA cruiser with them with defensive fire. Otherwise, it's kind of just free damage. Our Yamato does go down, unfortunately, and isn't enjoying himself. Not a lot of people were enjoying themselves in this test server, by the way. So maybe the more enjoyable for both sides is not the most successful, at least to start. To be fair, this is early days. This is the very first testing we've seen of this. Wargaming can change all of this. None of this could ever see the live server. So we do need to keep that in mind. And I really, really want them to do a good job on whatever changes come to the game. As I've said, I really, really, really enjoy this game and want to keep enjoying it for many years to come. And a lot of that hinges around what they change with carriers. If they can actually make them tolerable, I guess we'll go with. That would help a lot. As for proposed changes that I would be interested in, well, like I said, I want to have offensive measures against carriers and be able to play defense. It's not like I don't want to ever play defense. I just want to have the choice. So maybe if Wargaming made carriers have unlimited planes, purely unlimited planes. I'm not able to attack planes while they're at their cruising altitude. I'm not able to attack planes while they're not in the strike, right? Like it is now. But give me the option to manually go in and aim my AA mounts at the carrier. So that if I aim well and he doesn't dodge as well as I'm aiming, I take out his full squad before the drop comes off on me. But I can't strike or I can't attack the rest of his squad of planes up in the air. So he can come in and drop me, but there's actual engagement there. There's something I can do to prevent any damage at all. The other thing they could do is make carrier damage 100% healable. It would be far less annoying to take all these 14,000 damage drops over and over and over again if I could actually heal through it. Nice, good salvo from this Monty, by the way. Even the Monty salvo there, I can heal far more of that damage than I can of the carrier drop. And the Monty got that salvo by waiting, being patient, and timing a shot to punish me when I'm making a mistake. The carrier just walked over to me at, like, Mach speed, basically. Look at how quickly they can come in for you and just drop you over and over and over again. It's frustrating. It's just frustrating. And I don't think Wargaming has a great solution to that lack of gameplay. Just straight up. It's a PvP game, and it doesn't feel like there's any PvP happening. It feels like a tax, and they have not solved that. And if they do try and solve it, it might go to where carriers just aren't fun to play. And as their stated goals are to keep carriers in the game, you know, I'm not actually hoping that that'll happen where they remove carriers, because they'll never do it. I would love it, but they'll never do it. So I don't know. There just has to be some gameplay there. Maybe reduce carrier range as well. Like, limit them to their own, like, flavored nations maximum battleship range. Like, so give Japanese carriers Yamato range for their planes. You know, American carriers Montana range for their planes. I don't know. Something to have them risk more than just some planes, which in my opinion are the equivalent of modules. Okay, so that's it for the surface ship talk. Again, I think my opinions there are a little bit more valuable, a little more concrete, because I play a lot of surface ships. I know them quite well. Carriers, I suck with, all right? So take this all with a massive grain of salt and go watch some carrier players and see what their opinions are. But I think carriers are going to want to farm battleships and carrier snipe way more. They're not going to go after cruisers. They're not going to go after DDs. They're just going to go after the big, easy, slow battleships. Now look at here. Would it be a mistake to go in to drop a lone cur first like this? Well, no, probably not. But we'd go to drop and there's a Worcester. And we instantly lose 2 planes. what would happen in current carriers, the ones that are on live server? I would have lost all of my planes. Guess what? I only lost 2. And now I know where the Worcester is. So I can go over to the other side of the curve first, rather quickly, mind you, and go drop him again from an angle where that Worcester can't be in AA range of me. To me, this seems like I'm not being punished for making a mistake. It feels like it's dumbing it down to make it even easier. And the reason this is such a massive problem is that this is exactly what the first carrier rework did. The reason you hear, honestly, let's be real, kind of boomer World of Warships players, people who've been playing since the early days, talk about carrier rework, the RTS carriers, and wanting them back. It's not because RTS carriers were weak. They were way stronger than current carriers when played at the highest level. Not many people could do that though, and much fewer players played them. So in old RTS carriers, the average carrier was far worse, had far less battle impact than current carriers' average player, and you saw less of them. So that's what people want when they say, I want old RTS carriers back. They want to see a carrier once every 10 games and see a good carrier player once every 30 or 50 games, all right? That's what they're talking about. And that's why the new carriers are a little bit frustrating, is the mechanics got dumbed down so much that it's very easy for anyone to be average in them, and that average is more frustrating to play against as a surface ship player. Now, moving into this proposed changes, it seems like they're making it even less punishing, where I just can't lose my squad. There are 2 Worcesters in this, and one of them is coming back to help this GK. I'm bad at lining up drops. That is something I could learn over time. Hey, we're blinded, by the way. Look at that. There's that little eye icon at the bottom of our screen. Maybe that is something that could be displayed on our planes for surface ship players to see that, oh, this carrier plane got blinded, so I don't have to worry about them spotting me when they come overhead. Maybe. I don't know. UI, of course, can be changed. The other thing to consider is the effective DPM of a carrier has been increased by their travel time, so it's much, much quicker across the map. Sure, before you had the boost gauges and that kind of thing, you could fly rather quickly, but it was a limited resource, and it was something you had to manage. It took some skill. Some. And, I mean, it feels like you don't even have a speedometer. Like, there's nothing even telling you how fast you're going, right? It's just feels like the average carrier player in these new carriers is going to have an easier time farming damage off of battleships specifically, or carrier sniping. And I'm a battleship player, so I'm very biased, right? I'm very biased. But it's going to make it worse for me in particular, for battleships. For AA cruisers, it's going to be better. You just can't go strike an AA Worcester, especially with defensive fire up. But look at how we still got our strike through. Our 2 planes did not die there, right? I was able to use that heal. That's a new mechanic. Not every plane has a heal in the old carriers or in current carriers, but a lot of them do now. It's got a long cooldown though, to be fair. But we're engaging a GK surrounded by Worcesters. Back on the topic of not getting punished as hard and dumbing down carriers though, something you have to worry about is not only where you're approaching your strike from, but where does your strike lead you to after the strike? Where do your planes go after striking? Well, they go forward, across, wherever behind the ship that you struck. What's back there, right? I would have to worry about there being a Worcester and a GK behind that carrier. I would have to worry about when I'm striking the GK that I'm flying into 2 Worcester AA bubbles. But I don't in this. I'm not punished for that. I'm not punished for going for that greedy drop at all. So to me, as someone who does not play carriers at all, looking at these mechanics, it looks like you're punished less for going for full clumped up AA blobs. Sure, you're not going to get your drop through on defensive fire or really clumped up ships, and that can be frustrating. Like I said, you drop 1 torp as a Hakuryu all the time, or maybe none, but you don't lose your full squad. So how are you going to get deplaned? Back to our topic about the offensive measures of a carrier. How do you play offensively against a carrier? Some people would say it's deplaning a carrier. how do you get deplaned as a carrier in this, right? How do you ever get deplaned as a carrier in this game mode with these changes? I don't see it. Like we're dropping into, like, we're still hanging out around these Worcesters, man. And look at how we can turn around like this, by the way. If I was better at aiming and getting the drop reticle narrowed, not moving my mouse, we could do a lot better. You know, we only dropped 1 torp there, to be fair. But look at how we just instantly drop the torp. We get to like 3.5 kilometers, and then I turn, and you have full maneuverability during this first period. I haven't talked about this yet. I probably should. For the carrier changes, all of this is automated. When you go in for a strike, you automatically then go into this lower altitude pattern where it's preparing for a strike. And then it automatically counts down that timer, and then it gives you the, oh, reduced maneuverability, your aiming reticle starts to tighten up, and that's when you can actually drop. It's not a manual decision to change over, and I can see a lot of carrier players not liking that, because with dive bombers and rocket planes, it's very hard to aim these. Again, skill issue, I suck with carriers. I'm bad with these things, all right? I'll admit it. It's not a secret. But it's automated. Like, I can't decide to go in for the drop. I can only decide when to go start from high altitude and when I click to release the bombs. Those are the only options I have. Notice we got locked by fighters there, and we didn't lose a single plane. It takes them a long time to catch up to your planes, and it's so long that if you notice in time, you can recall your planes, and none of them get lost to fighters. There's a lot here, man. There's a lot here. I don't like carriers. I am biased against carriers, but I don't think this is going to be good for the game. I don't think, as a surface ship player, I want this in the game. It just means that carriers get to hover around you. It feels a bit like, I might have mentioned this already, it feels a bit like they're all just FDRs, right? You know what I'm talking about, right? When you're fighting an FDR, where it just slowly hovers around you, and every 25 30 seconds or so it comes in for a drop and gets its drop off on you, and there's really not much you can do. Here we go. See, notice I didn't, for some reason I didn't recall the planes, so we lost them all. But it took a while for those fighters to lock on to me, man. More than enough time to actually just push the F key and save all the planes. But a lot of them feel like FDRs now, because you're not able to kill the squad, and they're just going to come in and strike you over and over and over again. To be fair, we are not getting full strikes off on a GK surrounded by a Worcester. Still killed him, though. And as someone who's really bad in carriers, I was pretty unhappy with this. Again, coming down to the matchmaker here. How valid is this testing really when we're in 6v6, 2 carriers at tier 10 against full AA Worcesters, right? How valid a testing is that really? Here's the guns, by the way. They fire pretty quickly. Harugumo guns here, so we have 30 mil pen, and I'm just gonna miss everything basically. So not leading enough to start with, and then he maneuvers a little bit, and our shells go low, then our shells go high, so just terrible play by me. But it's kind of interesting to have these guns, I will admit. Things like a Graf Zeppelin, or even any of these carriers in a division with a smoke could be pretty funny. Yeah, so I'm a little disappointed, I will say. I think there's a lot here that hasn't been fully thought through. I think the automatic AA as a anti-focus tool is laughably short and lacking in damage to actually be a deterrent for an enemy carrier. Maybe it'd be good for an enemy carrier to know when that is activated, make it more powerful, and then let them know when it's activated, like they can know when a defensive fire is up after they are in the AA zone, to be fair. They should probably make it known to surface ships when our carrier plane's actively blinded or not. Those are UI things. Those are things they can change. The fundamentals of the design, though, feel like they're, again, dumbing things down, making them simpler, less punishing. And the average carrier in this new test, I'm worried, I don't know, of course, this is just early days still, I'm worried that it's going to result in a similar change like old carriers, RTS carriers, to the current iteration. dumbs it down. We see more carriers, and they're more impactful on average. The best players are worse in this than they were in the previous iteration, but on average, they're more frustrating to deal with. So, has Wargaming succeeded? Well, let's go back to what they wanted to tackle, the main issues. Spotting. I think this is a massive improvement. I think this is a big positive here of this chess so far. I think it's very easy to look at it as it's a failure because removing plane spotting entirely is just such an easy and obvious fix, and this is worse than that. But it is still a step in the right direction, especially for destroyers and AA cruisers as well. For battleships, it near enough makes no difference. I have no idea why fighter planes still spot like the old spotting plane system. That totally should not be a thing or happening in this test. Maybe that was an oversight, but how was that an oversight after 8 months of designing this test and internal testing? How did no one catch that? Questions, certainly. AA defenses don't feel sufficiently powerful for surface ships. Purely a failure. It feels worse. Feels relatively strong for carriers. Neutral to, as someone who's not experienced with carriers, much better. I don't lose my full squad for just accidentally clipping into Worcester AA. Right? I lose at most 2 or 3 planes. To me, that seems like I'm not punished as much. But for very good players, I can see it as frustrating that you don't have the option to be calculated in losing planes while getting your full strike off, right? Because the AA now targets purely the striking planes, and it reduces the incoming strike. So I can see where carrier players don't like that very much either. So to me, this feels like it massively changes the AA to be less punishing to carriers. But a good player could easily have the opposite opinion. And I would probably defer to that. Honestly, comes back to listen to carrier players, what they think about this, because I'm not going to play carriers anyway. I find carriers boring. I don't enjoy it. I mean, you're only playing off. Like, if we go back to my analogy of offense and defense, if you're only playing offense, that's not that interesting a game either. It feels like you're like beating up on people who aren't allowed to interact with you, right? Right? Like, I'm playing a PvP game. Let me, on relatively equal footing, let me engage, Okay, focus. Being targeted by an aircraft carrier can be extremely frustrating. I think a fail as well. Early days, of course. If Wargaming's watching this and you've managed to get to this part, hey, thanks for taking a look at my video. And I'm sorry if I've come across as too emphatic or over the top or whatever. I'm not actually intending this to be very like, Wargaming bad, this is so awful. I'm intending this to be, these are the things I really don't like and I don't think worked out. But I appreciate you guys checking things out and admitting there's some not so fun parts to your game. That's a big deal, as well as trying to fix them and letting us test them here as well. If it takes a while, go back to the drawing board, try and change some things, try some new things. I appreciate the development in trying to make this game better. I still really come back to the balance changes to surface ships. We're going to see that next patch with Henry getting back its old acceleration. To me, it seems like they want this game to be fun to play, and they're trying their best to actually balance things out. And they know this is a really hot button topic, and they're taking their time with it, which is good. And I hope it also means that they're really listening to player feedback. I hope that follows. I don't know that for sure. Again, let's try and act. I'm trying to play this in good faith like that, where I'm not gonna just instantly say Wargaming never listens to us, right? I'm gonna try as my best because I do want carriers to be less frustrating to play against, and I'll never get that if I just snap react and just rage out at Wargaming, I guess. That's kind of my perspective on it. Our goal is to reduce spotting overall and make it a conscious choice. Purely a win. Purely, you succeeded. Nailed it. 10 out of 10. I think for destroyers in particular, it's so much better. It is so much better. And I like the idea that it's intentional rather than no spotting at all, just flat, no gameplay there, or always spotting no matter what. Not really much interesting gameplay there. I think it's actually better than if they would reduce or remove carrier spotting overall. I actually like this better because it's gameplay, it's interaction, it's a player choosing something, right? That's what I want. I want more player interaction, less just automatic systems that are frustrating, right? That's the idea here, and this is great. This is great. As much as I think the spotting stuff doesn't matter, like these changes are neutral. They don't really matter against battleships or large cruisers. So if that's the goal, right? But the frustration of aircraft carrier spotting is oftentimes on stealth-oriented ships, which aren't really battleships for the most part. So it's a very minor thing, right? This is a big win here and big win here, in my opinion. These two a little bit less. So some good, some bad. You win some, you lose some. And for a first public test, I think it's pretty decent. I think we have a big problem with the matchmaker and the testing methodology here, where we have 6v6 games with 2 tier 10 carriers playing against full AA build Worcesters. How on earth are you getting good data for that as someone who's trying to balance these things and make these changes for a 12v12 system where you're fighting against multiple different tiers and ships that aren't going to be running a full AA build setup? Unless Wargaming intends to reduce Matchmaker down to +1, -1, which I'm in favor of, as well as give us the option to swap out captain builds and equipment modules at the beginning of games. They do that in World of Tanks, not commander builds, but the equipment modules that you have set up. You get 2 options, and you can switch them at the start of the game. If they let us do that, I could have AA set up and normal game set up. And that would also help this testing be a little more realistic. Otherwise, I don't see this data being that valuable outside of general direction player feedback, which is what I've tried to focus on. I may have gotten a little too down into the weeds, into the specifics in this video, but I have tried to keep it general. And in general, spotting change is good. Intentional spotting mechanics I like over pure spotting all the time, no gameplay. No spotting all the time, no gameplay, no interaction. I like this better. And as for getting focused by a carrier as a battleship, sucks. It's the same to maybe even a little bit worse for AA cruisers and destroyers. You're really not going to have to worry too much at all, at least in my opinion. Again, first impressions. That is the name here. This can all change. But that's going to do it for today's video. I've rambled a lot. I apologize. Is this video over an hour? Oh boy. Sorry guys. If you made it through, thank you. Thank you. But that's going to do it. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.